So we've got to make this thing look like these things. And to do so, we're going to have to use our exponent rules to multiply these fractions together. But we've got a problem. We can't use those exponent rules, not directly, because we've got different bases for each of the terms. So before we use the exponent rule for multiplication, we are going to have to try to get these bases the same. So how can we do that? Let's just focus on these first two. How can we get both of them to be a half or both of them to be a quarter? And actually, let's go for a half. And the reason I say that, the main reason I say that, is just glancing at these answer choices, 3 of them have halves in. It's just a half raised to something. So let's try to get both of these in terms of a half. And certainly we're in good shape for the first one, but how do we write a quarter in terms of a half? How can we just replace that quarter with something involving a half? Well, a quarter is just a half times a half, right? A half of a half. In other words, a quarter is just a half squared. So that was just replacing that quarter. We didn't really do any math there. We just rewrote a quarter as a half squared. So that half squared, or a quarter, is still being raised to the -2. And this first term here is still a half raised to the -3. Well, what about this 16th? How can we write a 16th in terms of a half? Well, the 16th is just a half raised to the 4th. Right? You can think of it backwards. If we were gonna raise a half to the 4th, well, we'd raise the numerator to a 4th and the denominator to a 4th, and well, 1 to a 4th would just be a 1, that would match, and 2 to the 4th is 16, so that would match as well. So we've replaced the 16th, and that 16th, or a half to the 4th, is still being raised to -1. But we're making progress. Now we've got halves involved in each of them, but there's some ugly extra exponent stuff going on here before we can use our multiplication rule for exponents. So let's see if we can take care of that. Our first term is still a half raised to the -3. Here we've got a half raised to a 2, all raised to a -2. So raised to something, and then the whole thing raised to something else. Well, our exponent rule for that is you multiply the two exponents. So our second term becomes a half raised to the 2 times -2. 2 times -2 is -4. And we do the same thing over here. A half raised to the 4, the whole thing raised to the -1 becomes a half raised to the product of these two, or 4 times -1, which is -4. And now we are where we want to be. We've got the same base for each of our terms, and we're just multiplying them, so we can apply our multiplication rule for exponents. So what do I do with these exponents? Well, if I'm multiplying a bunch of things with the same base, all I have to do is add the exponents. So this becomes a half raised to the -3 plus -4 plus -4. That's the same as saying -3 plus -4 is just like saying -3 minus 4, or -7, and then minus another 4 to bring us down to -11. And that is our answer, a half to the -11.